What's going on, guys? Ryan O'Toole back here again, and welcome to the next episode of the Endgame series, which is episode 5, Cinco. And thank you guys so much for watching the previous 4 episodes in the Endgame series. We've had on some fantastic YouTubers already. We had Austin Burke, Rama Screen, Russell Howell, and Daniel from Halfcocked. And now we have an awesome guest here as well. I've collaborated with this guy before, and we love movies as well. I love his channel, so definitely go check out his channel. He reviews a lot of movies. He does celebrity interviews as well, and he has an awesome James Bond podcast over on his channel, and I think you guys will not be disappointed. He needs no introduction. It's Griffin from Men vs. Movies. Griffin, what's going on, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me on here. Really appreciate it. I appreciate the praise as always, but I especially appreciated the Snoop Dogg reference at the beginning. You were like, "It's time for the next episode," and I'm like, "Man, he's getting in doing some deep cuts there." No, so but yeah, no, I'm thrilled to talk about this film. You originally gave me Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I had to protest that because I didn't want to come here and be angry because I'm not a big fan of that one. I wanted to come on here and be excited to talk about one of my favorite films in the MCU and probably what I feel to be one of the more underrated films in the MCU as well. It doesn't get the credit it deserves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm right there with you, man. We are talking about Captain America, the First Avenger, which came out in 2011, directed by Joe Johnston, a very underrated director, starring Chris Evans as Captain America, and you also have Haley Atwell, Sebastian Stan, Tommy Lee Jones, Toby Jones, and Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull. Griffin and I have a great discussion to get into, guys, and we want you to join in down below in the comments section. What are your guys' thoughts on this movie? Is First Avenger fantastic? Do you think it's overrated, underrated? We want to hear from you. And be sure to tag along in these questions as well. And let's have a friendly discussion down below. So, Griffin, I think we're ready to go, man.
Hell yeah. I'm all in. Let's dive into this bad boy.
All right. So the first question, Griffin, is pretty simple question. What was your experience with Captain America? Did you read any of the comics? Did you see this movie in theaters? What was your first experience with First Avenger?
Yeah, so I mean, full disclosure, Captain America is one of my favorite superheroes of all time. Really, I'm a big fan of the comic books. I just love the essence of that character. And, at surface level, it kind of looks like he's just, he's Marvel's Superman. He's just the straight guy. He's not really that interesting of a person. But it's when you start to kind of put him in different situations and really explore the inner workings of his mind and stuff like that, he starts to become a really interesting character. My first experience with the movie, well, first of all, I was stoked out of my mind to go see it. It was probably one of my most anticipated films of that year. Mm-hmm. And I actually have a funny story with it. So I was so this is 2011, so I'm probably a sophomore in high school. So I was doing some sort of overnight program for my confirmation because I'm Catholic, so I had to do a bunch of stuff, and it involved like working with the church overnight somewhere. So and it just so happened that clashed with when Captain America, the First Avenger was going to come out. And so I was like, well, I'm sure as shit not going to have that. So I found a way to actually sneak out of the thing. I either like faked a sickness, or I said I had an appointment the next day, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to stay overnight for this thing. So unfortunately, I got to dip out. But little did they know I was dipping out to go see Captain America, the First Avenger at the midnight screening back when they still did midnight screenings. And I have to be honest, I missed those. I missed those terribly. And, It was me and my mom, and we went and we saw it, and we had a great time. I loved every minute of it. It was probably one of my favorite films that came out that year. But what made it even better, and I'm sure we'll get into this with your questions, was the end credits scene. The end credits scene completely took everyone by surprise and blew them away, because not only do we get that little tidbit of him punching the punching bag in the gym, but we got the first teaser for the Avengers movie. And I just remember sitting that, everyone freaking out, having their mind blown. So all around, it was such a delightful, it was a great experience. I'm glad I was able to sneak out for that. So it was just Yeah, I loved it.
All right, so my first experience with First Avenger is pretty special. This was the first MCU film I saw in theaters, and I was
Oh dang.
super excited to see this film. I mean, I've always been a fan of Captain America. We're watching the 90s movie, wasn't that good, but I did read some of the comic books actually for Captain America, and I was just fascinated by this character and just a patriotic man. And he's also Captain America is also one of my favorite superheroes and my favorite MCU hero.
Yeah,
As
for
you
sure.
guys can see, Griffin and I are well known for having the shield in our background.
Of
So yeah,
course. And then I got,
yeah, you could definitely tell we
um,
hate Captain
yeah, of
America.
course. We hate him. He's horrible.
Yeah. But yeah, I saw this movie in theaters. I saw it with my friend actually, and we were so excited. I mean, walking out of this movie, I fell in love with this movie.
Hmm.
I fell in love with Chris Evans as Captain America. I fell in love with the story, and just was so excited to see what they were going to do with Captain America.
Look at the cast. I mean, this is a
Mm-hmm.
stacked cast. Like everyone in here is pretty well known. The only one who maybe wasn't so was like, you know, Dominic Cooper and Sebastian Stan and Haley Atwell. They were like the
Mm-hmm.
definitely the lower tier, but you know, Chris Evans was already well known for doing, you know, romantic comedies, but also playing Johnny Storm in the Fantastic
Yeah.
Four. Tommy Lee
Mm-hmm.
Jones is a world-class talent. Hugo Weaving is
Mm-hmm.
obviously the infamous for playing a great bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Toby Jones. I mean, it's just you have all of these people involved in this movie, and you're like, how, like, this is incredible. This is just an unbelievable cast that they assembled here for an incredible origin story. Completely forgot Stanley Tucci.
Oh,
I mean,
Stanley Tucci. Poor
is great in
Stanley
this.
Tucci.
Dude, it's oh, I
Yeah.
love him. He's great.
Yeah, he's so underrated. I love him. He was really good in this film.
Mhm.
But that's the next question I wanted to ask you, Griffin, actually, is why did this movie work so well in the MCU?
Well, I think there's several reasons why it worked really well. I mean, we already talked about the cast. You've got A-list talent involved with this. Joe Johnston. You know, it's interesting because looking at it now, you know, he could have been a hit or miss kind of pick because he's had some great movies, and he's you know, proven that, well, I'll get into that a little bit later on, but he's had some good movies and he's had some misses. Jumanji previously, he was well known for doing The Rocketeer,
The
and you can
Rocketeer,
see,
yeah.
you can see that influence in this film because I think one of the reasons Captain America: The First Avenger works so well is it's not trying to be a straight up World War II film. It's trying to be a World War II serial. So a little heightened reality going into kind of retro futurism with the Stark technology and the Hydra technology. Obviously, that's not really what it was like, but it kind of immersed you in this, yeah, like this retro futuristic world version of World War II. I was thinking about it, you know, if they had made this film in black and white, it would have felt even more like a serial, which was just it makes for a fun adventure along the way. But then also casting Chris Evans was a stroke of genius, you know, because at the time we were like, oh, so they're going to get Johnny Storm to play Captain America. That's interesting. Are people going to get confused? Obviously, they didn't get confused, but Evans to me has always been an underrated actor. He doesn't get the credit he deserves for the subtle work that he does. And I think, especially in this, you see the foundation built for a character who is perfectly realized. We know what he's about. We understand his morals. We understand why he wants to, you know, fight. He's driven by a passion to do good. He doesn't. I mean, he says in the film, I don't like bullies, you know, and we see that, and we kind of get a glimpse at, you know, what his upbringing in life has been like up until that point. He's had to deal with confrontation and adversary, and he's always had to find out how to get around it, whether it's through Bucky or using his wits and intellect. And so he felt that he had something to give and he wanted to contribute. So we see him going through all of these, you know, he's trying to enlist multiple times. He's breaking the law in order to do his civic duty. Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull is another reason this works, because I think he, out of phase one, everyone really likes Loki in the Avengers. And I think we can agree he's probably the best villain from that phase, but he's the best villain in the Avengers, not necessarily the best villain in Thor. I like him, but not the best. I would say the best villain of phase one pre-Avengers is the Red Skull, because he's so he just Hugo Weaving perfectly commits, and I thought they got the look of the Red Skull right. Like it was.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't too realistic, but it wasn't like too cartoony. They found the perfect balance, and then Hugo Weaving really just like gave himself to the role, playing this Nazi madman who's just driven by a lust for power. Very very Raiders of the Lost Ark. In fact, I think another reason this movie works is because it has Raiders of the Lost Ark vibes in it through some of the action. The you know, everyone chasing after the MacGuffin, basically, which is the Tesseract.
Yeah, Griffin said pretty much everything I wanted to say, but
I'm sorry, I have
no, it's okay. It's okay
about this movie.
Me too. I love the passion, but yeah, everything you said, Griffin, pretty much is why this movie absolutely works. It's the story, the characters, the romance. I mean, Bucky. Like, I need to talk about Bucky and Steve. Like, this is the best friendship in the MCU. Yeah. Like, both of these two have gone through so much together. I believe the friendship, and I just love the performances that Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan give. And I just love a lot of things about it. The romance. Oh, man, we'll talk about that later. But, yeah, Red Skull, I 100% agree. I think he's one of my favorite MCU villains. Hugo Weaving's awesome. And the war things. This movie's a war movie. That's freaking awesome in the MCU. It's one of those films, looking back from now, that people are going to look at, oh, Captain America the First Avenger. That was a pretty awesome movie.
It's infinitely rewatchable because it has such a breakneck pace. This movie moves. It does not feel like it's 2 hours long. And the other part of that is that it, like you said, with the whole war thing, it feels self-contained. Yeah, it's got little like inklings of the MCU in it, but it's a pretty like self-contained and standalone film. The only other movies that I think come close to it or really are on the same level in terms of standalone are the Ant-Man films.
If Chris Evans was never cast as Captain America, who else could play him? I know there have been rumors that John Krasinski was going to play Captain America, but I cannot see that. But Griffin, besides those two, who could you see playing Captain America?
It's really tough just because out of all of the characters, he's right up there with Robert Downey Jr., where he's just become Captain America. I can't really see anyone else playing him. But you mentioned John Krasinski. That would have been an interesting choice. At the time when they were casting this, now I think I could probably see him in there, but at the time that would have been an out of left field, really interesting choice because he's coming off of The Office. He's really only shown himself as a comedic actor. So that would have been a little weird. The one name that comes to mind, and he may have been a little too
might I add something?
Oh, yeah.
I watched John Krasinski's interview on Jimmy Fallon, and he brought up the fact that he was going to play Captain America, but his meeting with Kevin Feige, he said that you gotta work out, and he was doing The Office there and there. Then he saw Chris Hemsworth, and he's like, yeah, this isn't for me.
To be fair, if anyone saw Chris Hemsworth and Thor, that was like, fuck, how do I follow that up? The only other person I could possibly see taking on the role would be Ryan Gosling.
Ooh, nice.
He's another guy similar to Chris Evans who's just he excels with subtlety, and Captain America is a very subtle character with underplayed moments of palpable emotion, which is one of the reasons why I love him. I also think just Ryan Gosling has that look where he might be able to pull it off.
What about Armie Hammer?
Armie Hammer would be another good one. Actually, that's a great point. I didn't think about that just because I've always like thought of him as playing Batman because I think he'd make a great Batman. But I agree, he'd also be a good Captain America. At the time, it's just one of those things where it's I don't think he was well known enough to the point where he could have slid into the role. But
yeah, because I wrote Armie Hammer down. He seems like he'd be a pretty good Captain America.
Yeah, I agree. He would be.
Do you like this movie more as a comic book movie or a war movie?
I don't. I almost feel like it has more in line with like a the type of like propaganda film that would come out during World War II than it does like a traditional war film. Because it's got comic book elements in it. But it doesn't feel comic booky, if that makes sense. It feels more, yeah, it feels more like when we see in like the Star Spangled Man montage, it feels more like those old like just classic like Captain America beating up the Nazis kind of films that you would see at the theater at the time. So it definitely feels like it belongs in the time period of World War II. But I don't think it wholeheartedly feels like a war film, and I think that's because it doesn't focus on the war necessarily. It's not necessarily about him fighting Hydra, fighting the Nazis. It focuses more so on the characters.
I really enjoyed like the war setting, like all with
Yeah.
the Nazi feeling with Hydra, and just seeing the battle sequences in this movie. Like you feel like you're in World War II, and Captain America is just leading the charge and taking out all the Nazis, including the Red Skull.
Yeah.
And as a comic book movie, it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite origin stories of all time. It's
Sure.
It works as both if you think about it, as a comic book movie and as a war movie. But I really love to call this a war movie as well, but I love both.
No, I would agree with that. And I think it has more in line with the original Captain America comic books that came out during World War II. So it's like kind of like a blend of that, a little bit of war film in there. The other like kind of Raiders of the Lost Ark vibe I get from it is how like Raiders uses the backdrop of World War II to kind of set the stage for Indiana Jones's adventure. That's kind of what I get from this film as well. It uses the backdrop in a similar way.
So Griffin, now let's talk about our one favorite scene of this movie. If you can only pick one, what's your favorite?
Yeah, that sucks because there's so many to choose from. Like literally when Stanley Tucci's like when Stanley Tucci says Mr. Stark and that gate opens and you see Chris Evans just fucking buff for the first time. I mean, it really like
yes.
Sure, people could go, "Oh, it's just an eye candy moment," but the significance of that moment to see that the science was sound and that it worked and that he kept who he was on the inside, and just seeing all of the hard work that went into Chris Evans like sculpting his body was nuts. I mean, I love how they like sprayed like the water on him to make it look like he was sweating, and then like you get Haley out little like touching it.
How do you feel? How do you feel? Taller.
I mean, it's such a heroic and character defining moment. It's Steve's transformation, one of the more iconic moments in the MCU, and it's one of the more memorable Captain America moments because we saw him as this scrawny kid for like a good chunk of the film, and then he finally becomes Captain America. So it's a great moment. I love it, especially with Alan Silvestri's score.
Yes. Now I want to talk about my favorite scene in this film, and that's when he brings all the soldiers back to the camp.
Yeah, that was my
favorite scene. Yep. Yeah. So when Tommy Lee Jones and Haley Atwell, they're in the thing, and then all the soldiers are coming like, what's going on here? And then you see all the soldiers and you hear Alan Silvestri's da, 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 da. And that scene's just so amazing because it gives me chills every time. Exactly. That's the scene where I truly feel that he's Captain America now. Everybody loves him. Everybody respects him now, including Tommy Lee Jones. It's just an awesome, incredible scene that I love.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I love Peggy Carter's line, "You're late."
Oh yeah,
couldn't call my ride.
The answer is so it's great. It's cheeky. It's lovable. It feels
for Captain America.
Yeah, something like that. One quick aside, I might add. That is my favorite outfit that Steve has ever worn throughout the entirety of the MCU. Is that first outfit when he goes and he storms the Hydra base?
Yes,
it just looks so badass,
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, the next question, the tough question, I think, our least favorite scene in this film.
Yeah. That's interesting. I wouldn't say I have a least favorite scene. The gripe people bring up when it comes to this film is that the first half is so strong, and then it kind of montages through the war to get to the end of the film. And I get it because there are a lot of montages in this film. I'll tell you, I'll say that. But I think stylistically they all work. They all serve a purpose. Like the Star Spangled Man one is perfect. I love it. It's like an homage to, you know, classic 30s, 40s Captain America. And then you get the war stuff, which is like very much in line with that World War II serial where you see him fighting with the Howling Commandos. And I don't think that we needed to necessarily see all of those like sequences of them raiding the Hydra base because it would have gotten a little redundant. So they put it together in a nice montage with a great track by Alan Silvestri. We see them working together. And yeah, so I love all that. The film can get a little campy at times, but I think it's purposefully campy because it's playing into that World War II serial that I mentioned. So that doesn't necessarily bother me either.
The one scene, I don't know, that kind of comes to my mind is the scene with Tommy Lee Jones and Toby Jones in that that interviewing room, and he's eating a steak.
Like
No. No, I don't. No, I didn't say I didn't like it. Maybe that's the one scene I was like, yeah. But
dude,
no.
Oh man, I'm gonna fight you on that because I think that's one of the best scenes because
where he's eating a steak dinner.
Yeah, because it's Tommy Lee Jones literally chewing the scenery, intimidating Toby Jones, who's even and their banter is so deliciously written. I love how they use food to kind of like just go about talking and whatnot. And I think that is, you know, everyone mentions Tommy Lee Jones at the beginning of the film, him being really good. That to me is Tommy Lee Jones's best moment out of the entire movie because of how, you know, he's just really playing into some of the Tommy Lee Jones isms that he's known for, and he's just he comes across very confident, which I love.
Now you've already answered this question, so I don't think we need to answer it. Were you satisfied with the romance? We both love it.
Yeah. I think it's my favorite because they don't try to force it onto you. It feels very natural. Like, I mean, from the first moment where they come in contact, maybe not on the military base, because she's kind of like, well, actually, no, I would say even on the military base in some instances, she gives him glances where it's like, I really admire who you are as a person. Basically starting there and then all the way up until we get to the end where she pulls out the picture from the file and it play, you know, Silvestri's music is swelling and the look on her face. I mean, you can tell she really deeply cares for who he is. And not just because he's like this big buff macho man. She knew him before then. She appreciated who he was before then and respected him for it. And so when she pulls out the picture of the end of him as that guy, it affected her because she was like, that's Steve. That's the Steve that I knew, even with all of the transformation that he was going through.
I bought it from the start. Like you mentioned, when Steve Rogers was really skinny, and then Haley Atwell, she's the leading commanding officer of this army. And that the scene when they're all standing in line, that one cocky guy is like, step forward, and then she punches him in the face and all that. Yeah. And that was an awesome scene. Yeah. And then she just sees him and she respects him. Exactly. Yeah. And then the scene where he deflects that grenade, that's the scene where she's like, all right, I like this guy.
Yeah,
yeah. And then to see their relationship build from there and there, they communicate so well. They have great chemistry, and they love each other.
Yeah, you can really feel the love between the two of them. Yeah.
What is your opinion on the Red Skull? We both love the Red Skull. Does this work? Does this villain work because of Hugo Weaving being cast, or do you feel this is a compelling villain all in particular?
Well, I've always loved the Red Skull as just a villain in Captain America comics because, you know, I mean, realistically, he is just evil Nazi trying to take over the world. That is who Red Skull is. And I mean, there's been different, you know, he's been written differently in different comic arcs, but when you boil it down to it, it's Captain America fighting the Nazis, and that's why he works as everyone hates the Nazis. But I think why I like him so much in the film, because, you know, broad strokes, he is just like a maniacal genius trying to take over the world. Why he works in the film is because of Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving adds that extra layer to him. What I love about it is he is so believable. He believes in. You really see him believe in his own ideologies and, you know, trying to take over the world, and not like in a I'm trying to take over the world kind of way. In a I feel that I'm a superior being, much like the Nazis, but just kind of in a heightened reality. And I feel that this is the right thing to do. And so you see that it's not like, obviously, no one agrees with him and thinks he's a lunatic, but it's that commitment from Weaving that gives the Red Skull, that makes him work.
Exactly. Yeah, Hugo Weaving, he's played so many characters. He's played Agent Smith from The Matrix, so he knows how to play a villain. And Hugo Weaving just makes this character so compelling and awesome. And for a hot take, my brother Cody, he doesn't like the Red Skull.
Really?
I know you want to fight him on that. Yeah, it's one of his worst MCU villains, but
Weird.
I 100% disagree. I think the Red Skull, he's compelling because you definitely get what he wants. He wants power, and his look is awesome. I love the opening scene with him invading in Tonsberg, Norway, and he finds the Tesseract, the first Infinity Stone, which is an awesome introduction to the character.
I think, real quickly, but before you continue, I think the thing I love about I think that is one of the best villain introductions out of the entire series, other than Thanos. I think Thanos has the best villain introduction by far.
Yes,
but
yes, okay.
I think similar to what happens with Thanos, you have that scene and everything that Red Skull is about. You know everything about the character in that moment, and you just let the villain chew the scenery. So I thought it was really kind of smart for Marcus and McFeely, who wrote the Captain America: The First Avenger and wrote all the Captain America films and Infinity War, to kind of do a similar thing with Infinity War with establishing Thanos.
The thing that makes a villain compelling is you got to make them compelling from the opening scene. You got to know what they want. You got to make them intimidating, and you have to get you to understand what they're saying and where they're coming from. Absolutely. And that's why, And I think for Red Skull in particular, that opening scene where he finds the Tesseract, this guy wants power. He wants to take over the world, and he has reasons for why he wants to do what he wants to do. And I think that's a great villain introduction and why I love villains. Griffin, where does this movie rank in your MCU ranking? There's 20 movies. Where does this rank?
It's either 5 or 6. It's either 5 or 6. On my MCU ranking list. I absolutely adore this film. It's so delightful. It's one of the best origin films, not only in the MCU, but ever. It so perfectly establishes the character. And for me, it's the film in the MCU that I've rewatched the most.
My last MCU ranking that I did was for Infinity War. I have that at number 10. But right now, I have it at 7 or 8 right now.
After rewatching it?
Yeah, after rewatching it. I don't know. Yeah. Thor Ragnarok. It's between First Avenger, Ant-Man, and Thor Ragnarok. Like those three films shuffle around.
Yeah. For me, I adore the Ant-Man film. So it's like both Ant-Man films and then Captain America kind of all circle around that 5, 6, and 7 slot.
Now let's get to the final question. Now you've been talking to me about this earlier, but how do we think this film, Captain America: The First Avenger, will affect the Endgame?
Well, ultimately, there's two things here. You can look at it from one angle, which is what elements from this film are they going to bring back into Endgame, which we've already seen them bring back Red Skull in Infinity War. So maybe Red Skull makes an appearance in Endgame. I find it difficult to believe that they're not going to reuse him. Which, by the way, when Red Skull reappears in Infinity War, I was
the loudest person in my theater. Oh my god!
I felt so vindicated in my belief that he wasn't dead, because I never thought he was dead. I was like,
I never knew he was dead. No,
we would have seen him get killed, but no. So I absolutely love that, and so I could see them maybe bringing him back in for when the Avengers have to. If you believe the theory that all of the dead Avengers are trapped inside the Soul Stone, maybe they have to, talk with Red Skull in order to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. He's on Vormir now. I could definitely see him having a role in Endgame for sure.
Yeah, that's one angle to look at. That's kind of like the surface level. But the other angle, and I think the angle that's more likely, is that is that Endgame is going to conclude the journey of Steve Rogers one way or another. Chris Evans doesn't want to do any more films. Maybe they'll convince him, but to my knowledge, he doesn't want to do any more films. Whether that is in killing him, which I feel like it'd almost be too obvious to do that. I'd almost rather him just kind of go off, just be done with it.
I think he's gonna retire and give it to Bucky.
Absolutely, that's kind of where I'm at too. But nevertheless, however they choose to conclude the character's journey, it's a journey that began in the first Avenger. And we've seen him go through different, jump through different hoops and climb different ladders along the way. But ultimately, Endgame is where the journey for Steve Rogers is going to end. So
there's so many things you can speculate. How First Avenger, one of the first Phase 1 MCU movies, how is it going to affect the 21st MCU film, Endgame? It all comes down to Captain America. He's going to have to go back to his roots because Captain America has to be the leader again. He has to be the Boy Scout, the guy who is the best out of all, and he has to try to figure out how he's going to get all of his friends back from the snap. And he has to learn how to become that hero that he was in First Avenger.
Absolutely.
And how he saved all of those soldiers in First Avenger. I think he could do that same thing in Endgame. He has to learn how to be that super soldier he was in First Avenger. So, and I could definitely see Red Skull playing a part in Endgame as well on Vormir. The thing with the Soul Stone and all that, with all the characters who vanished are trapped in there. Right. But it all just comes down to Captain America, how he has to be the leader again and get all of his friends back from the snap. Well, that was a fantastic discussion, man. You definitely came in prepared and brought us some fantastic points, man. But guys, let us know your thoughts and opinions about this movie and what are your responses to those questions. And Griffin, thank you so much, man, for taking part in this Endgame series and talking about First Avenger with me. It was a total blast, man. And before we go, tell my lovely subscribers where they can find you on all your social media.
Yeah, well, thank you again for inviting me on to do this. Any chance I get to talk about Captain America is always welcomed. But yeah, if you guys are interested, you can check out the Men vs. Movies channel for like what Ryan said. We do regular reviews. We have a couple podcast type shows. We got an Oscar one. We have a James Bond one. And so you just head over there, hit the subscribe button if you're interested. You can also go to Facebook or Twitter, type in Men vs. Movies. We just started a SpongeBob like One Perfect Shot style Twitter account where we're taking images from SpongeBob.
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
Putting captions over it. So if you're interested in some spongy humor, you can go check out one.
I get notifications like Zach Pope, Griffin, and John from the Real Talk post. I was like, oh, what is it?
Yeah, it's a Twitter account basically run by me, Zach, John, and Tyler, just throwing out SpongeBob images. So if you have SpongeBob images that you think represent a film, throw it at us. Sure.
I'll try to find some. I'll try to find some.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, hit that out. It's One Spongy Shot. And then if you want to follow me specifically, it's at Griff Schiller. Go
check out Griffin. He has fantastic content over there. You will not be disappointed. And yes, thank you, Griffin, once again. And thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Endgame series. If you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to both of us and stay tuned to the next episode because it's the final movie in Phase 1, The Avengers, and that's going to be with my good pal Jay Vaders, who I've collabed with over 20 times. I mean, look forward to that, guys. All my social media links are in the description down below. Click that notification bell on your way out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, America!